Welcome back to the Chillson channel, and you are looking live at one of the most magical moments of my entire life. This is October 24th, 1998, and this is the ribbon cutting, the grand opening at Yogi Berra's Museum and Learning Center in Montclair, New Jersey. There you see the man in the middle himself, Yogi Berra, with his scissors, having just snipped that ribbon, dedicating the museum to Yogi at the Learning Center that was right behind him. As Yogi Berra told the Associated Press back on that opening day, quote, "Usually when you get something like this, you're dead or you're gone," end quote. So still had the Yogiisms going there. On the left, you see Ralph Branca, of course, the great Brooklyn Dodgers hurler. And on the right, that's Larry Doby. Larry Doby, of course, the second man to integrate Major League Baseball, the first man to do it in the American League. And Larry Doby in himself was quite a story that year. He had just been inducted into Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame, sort of surprisingly to him, in the summer of 1998. And so there's a good reason he has that smile on his face. He was great friends with Yogi Berra. They lived in the same town, and so it was natural for them all to be together at the opening of that museum. What is not pictured in that image is yours truly, Mookie Chillson, in the audience there, getting ready to meet and greet all of them, but specifically Larry Doby, because I was doing a research project on Larry Doby, because I found his story so fascinating and so compelling that I wanted to get college credit for a paper on Larry Doby. And so there I was. And so this is the story of that interview, and how 27 years later, this year, just a couple of weeks ago, I put an amazing bow on this story with a great encounter and a great event back here in New Jersey that I want to fill you in on. And I hope you will stick around to the end, because it really is, to me, it was special. I hope you will agree. Anyway, so why was I there and expecting to get to meet and greet and interview Larry Doby? Well, that's because I had read Larry Doby's biography by this man, Dr. Joseph Thomas Moore, who wrote Pride Against Prejudice, the biography of Larry Doby. This is a book that came out in the late 80s. It was 10 years old, and when you went to do a research project on Larry Doby at that time, this was the seminal work. This was the great resource you needed to read if you were going to do anything like what I was attempting to do. And so I went to the library and checked this book out, not that exact book, but a library version of that book. And I came to realize that the author of that book was a professor at my college. And so I decided, I'm going to go see if I can interview Dr. Joseph Thomas Moore. And he very graciously accepted my invitation to meet. I went to meet him in his office. I sat across from him for what seemed like hours. It probably wasn't hours, but it was quite a long time. And at the end of it, I said to Dr. Moore, you know, what I didn't tell him when I went in there is I had gotten Larry Doby's phone number. He was in northern Jersey, and so I found his yellow pages or his white pages, and his number was right in there. And so I said to Dr. Moore, I want to call this phone number and talk to Larry Doby, but I'm afraid he will just sort of reject that out of hand and not be interested. Larry Doby was somebody who probably had his delayed entry into the Hall of Fame because he wasn't somebody who went around and talked to everybody who wanted to talk to him. He was a private man who did not go out telling his story, put it that way. This was, again, the only biography at that time of Larry Doby, as far as I know. And so Dr. Moore was friends with him, and I thought maybe Dr. Moore could put in a good word for me. And he agreed to consider it. And so later on, maybe a week later, I recontacted Dr. Moore and I said, what do you think? And he said, yes, you call Larry's number. That is the number. He will talk to you. And I couldn't believe it. I was over the moon. And so there I was on the phone calling Larry's number, and his wife picked up the phone and she said, hold on, I'll get Larry. And I said, great. So Larry Doby got on the phone, said hello. And I said, hi, and I'm working on this research project. Dr. Moore suggested that you might talk to me. Would you mind? And he said, I can't talk right now. But he said, I'm going to be at the opening of the Yogi Berra Museum in October 24th. And if you're there, I will talk with you and have a short interview with you. I thought, great, this is perfect. This is perfect, great. And so I went to this museum opening again. And this was an incredible event. The Yogi Berra Museum, if you haven't been there, it's still open and active and amazing. And everybody was there. Ralph Branca, Yogi, Larry Doby, Gil McDougall was there. I believe Whitey Ford was there, but don't quote me on that. I think Ron Guidry may have been there, but don't quote me on that. But the other person, the other incredible celebrity who was there was this guy. There's Ted Williams was there, 80-year-old Ted Williams. This is the day. And I remember watching this exchange, this interaction, these two giving each other guff about whatever they were talking about. And so it was great. And I actually got to meet Ted Williams and ask him what he thought about. I asked him what he thought about Tony Gwynn, who had just lost the World Series to the Yankees in '98. And he was gracious and great and yelled his answer about how Tony Gwynn was the greatest hitter he ever saw or whatever. Oh, it was so amazing. But anyway, I did get to meet and greet with Larry Doby, and I went over to him and introduced myself and told him what I was up to, and he remembered me. And I had 3 questions lined up for him. I asked him how it felt to be finally recognized as a member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and he talked about how great it was and the feelings he had. And I think he was genuinely thankful and surprised that this had finally happened. I asked him what his relationship was with Satchel Paige. There had been talk about how he didn't really care for Satchel and his style and his demeanor. And Mr. Doby told me that he didn't like rooming with Satchel Paige in 1948 because Satchel cooked catfish in his grill in their room. That was the worst part about him. So he sort of diffused that line of questioning. And then I asked him about Bill Veeck, who he told me treated him like a son and was one of the great relationships and mentorships he could ever have hoped for as a professional athlete and as a young man growing up in baseball and beyond. And so it was great. I shook his hand. I'll never forget that gray suit. I'll never forget talking to Larry Doby. And so it was one of the great moments of my life. And again, in pandemic era, it has launched me back into collecting Larry Doby cards. And so that's why I have all these fun and interesting cards. There's my Hires Root Beer Larry Doby and my Burke Ross. This is a Boomerang Larry Doby. I bought this and graded that and got it traded back to me. I actually traded it away and then bought it back. This is from my pal Tony. Larry Doby's autograph on a 51 Bowman. This is from Larry Doby's time in Japan with the Junichi Dragons. Incredible card. There's his rookie card, 1949 Bowman. Let's see if I can get that to stop racking. Beautiful card. And this, by the way, is my first Larry Doby pinhole card. Can you see that? Up at the top, there's a pinhole. And what I love about this card is it's not just a pinhole card. If you turn it around, this card, I think, was pinholed and then glued. Now you can see there's some album paper there. But if you look at the back, this is like some serious rubber cementing was done. So somebody took out the brush and painted the back of this card to attach it inside an album. And so getting it off was not pretty. So the theory of the case is this card was pinned and then eventually taken off the wall and put into an album. Anyway, I can't. That's my first pinhole Larry Doby card. So why am I telling you this story now? Why? Well, that's because I had an amazing exchange, an interlude with one of the main characters in this story 27 years later. And I will tell you that story now by way of this. I went to Hinchcliffe Stadium, is the Negro League stadium that has been restored in Paterson, New Jersey. They were having a baseball card show that my buddy Dan from Dan's Vintage PC was set up and selling a table at. And I told him that I actually, had been there before. I knew Larry Doby's story and what had happened there. Larry Doby tried out for the Newark Eagles at Hinchcliffe Stadium. And he said, oh, you should come back to this event they're holding here in 2 weeks. On February 8th. It's Larry Doby. They're showing a documentary, and there's going to be speakers, and his biographer is going to be there. And I said, wait a minute. You don't mean his biographer, Dr. Joseph Thomas Moore? And he said, yeah, I think that's the guy. And I said, I can't believe it. I didn't realize he was still around and still doing the speakers circuit. And so my jaw was on the floor. I said, I got to go to that. I have to go to that. And so go to that I did. This is the Hinchcliffe Stadium. Where is it? This is not the museum itself. This is the mural outside of Hinchcliffe Stadium. But I went back to the museum, and there was a great event and a great panel of guests. In fact, there were two speakers on the panel. One of them was this man who wrote, Luke Eplin, who wrote Our Team, a great story of Bill Veeck, Satchel Paige, Larry Doby, and Bob Feller, and the four characters that sort of, as he writes, the epic story, Four Men in the World Series that changed baseball in 1948. So it was great to meet Luke Eplin. I had read this book as well. And guess who else was there? Dr. Joseph Thomas Moore was there. And I don't know how old Dr. Moore is, I wouldn't guess. But it was great to see him. He was, after the documentary, he took questions from the audience that was assembled, and I was one of the people who, of course, asked him a question. And my question was, Dr. Moore, do you think that your book had any influence? What level of influence do you think it had on making sure that people knew about Larry Doby and therefore helped induct him into the Baseball Hall of Fame? And he said, I would like to think it helped. And I asked him if Larry ever mentioned anything like that to him. And he said, no, he didn't. Again, Larry was a private man and did not do too much of that. Anyway, so after the event, I went up to Dr. Moore and I said, I really, you won't remember me. But 27 years ago, I sat in your office and you helped me connect with Larry Doby at that museum opening. And I don't know if he was being polite, but he said he remembered. And I just told him how much it meant to me and how much of a lifelong journey it sent me on, from baseball cards to reading about history to appreciating history to all of it. Just a fulfilling journey that he and this book helped send me on, and Larry Doby's story, obviously. And it was just great to meet him and shake his hand again. And when I presented him with the book, I asked him if he would sign it, and he did. And he wrote it right there, right under his name. Joseph Thomas Moore, best wishes. And as Dr. Moore said to me after, he said, do you know why I put best wishes? I said, I sure do. That's how Larry Doby signs. He said, that's right. And it's funny, my other copy of the book, I'd never asked Larry Doby for an autograph, or Ted Williams or Yogi Berra. It sort of was not really the scene for autograph seekers back in those days. But my other book I got off the secondary market here. To George, best wishes, Larry Doby. So now I have a best wishes Larry Doby, and I have a best wishes Joseph Thomas Moore. And so that's the coda to the end of this story, and the most magical day of my life, one of the most magical days of my life, sons of Mookie being born, and my wedding to my beautiful wife, Lady Chillson, is, of course, and several others are ahead of this. But in terms of I can't believe that happened to me type stories. This is it. And I think that's it. And if you have any questions, I'll send you my phone numbers in the book. That's it. I think I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Thank you.